Today is September 1st, and welcome back to the Pylon Cam Podcast. We have a fantastic show prepared for you today. We are joined by a very special guest today who I'm excited to introduce. Before I introduce him, I want to dive into the vision for this podcast and channel. And that vision is to provide quality content and accurate sports takes. Starting in this episode, we will be bringing on fans who know their stuff about their favorite team and can share it with you guys. Today, we welcome our very first guest who will walk us through the NFC East from a New York Giants fan's perspective. Justin Penik is the co-host of the Talkin Giants podcast. Talkin Giants is the largest Giants podcast in the country, the Dominican Republic, and the world. Please help me in welcoming our very first special guest, Justin Penik. Justin, how are you doing today?
Mike, it's great to be on. Happy to be here. Talk about some Giants, kind of like what we do, and kind of going through the schedule, have some Q&A stuff. So I'm excited to be here, brother. How are you?
I'm good. I've been waiting for this all day. So to get into it, to just jump into it right away, I want to talk about just a quick recap of the NFC East in 2020. There are a few things to remember going into the 2021 season. First and foremost, Washington football team did win the division at 7-9, and I think that is a record that is more than likely to change positively. I think that we need to remember as fans of football that Dak Prescott did suffer a gruesome injury, and the Cowboys, I'm pretty sure you could fact check me on this, but they are the running favorites to win the NFC East at 9.5 wins. And then, last but not least, the Eagles famously or infamously took part in the tank job against Washington football team in Week 16 to deny the Giants a playoff berth, which would have, even at 7-9, tipped them over Washington in the head-to-head games. So to go through my projections, a lot of people watching this are going to snicker at the Giants' projections. I have them at 11-6. I have Washington at 10-7. Dallas at 8-9, and Philly at 6-11. And before I kick this over to you, Justin, I want to kind of give a quick recap of why I think the way I'm thinking. So it's no question, and I actually really hate to admit this, but this is probably the first and last time I'll ever agree with Max Kellerman. The Giants have the most well-balanced team in the NFC East. That's not even negotiable. They have the second best offense, and they have the second best defense. And in my opinion, they have the highest upside. You could argue they have the top 3 wide receiver in Kenny Golladay, who led the league in touchdowns in 2019, and particularly red zone touchdowns. And Saquon Barkley's back. And if Daniel Jones can, take that next step, I think that the Giants are pretty much a lock to win this division. Washington, bar none, has the best roster. I don't think that that's even up for debate. But why I have the Giants edging out over Washington is Ryan Fitzpatrick cannot be trusted. Can't be trusted at any cost. He's too streaky. And especially in the NFC East where you can't afford to lose 2 games back-to-back because it's up for grabs, Ryan Fitzpatrick should not be your quarterback. And then with Dallas, it's important to remember that Dallas was 1-3 with Dak, and they were losing against the Giants in Week 5 with Dak.
Yeah.
And the Eagles, I have no idea what to make of the Eagles. So I'm going to kick this over to you, but one question I want to ask you before we dive into this is, you have a player like Patrick Mahomes, right? And I'm pulling Patrick Mahomes into this conversation because I think as a coach, the question that I would be asking myself is, how do I elevate Patrick Mahomes, who is the best talent in football at the quarterback position, to that next level? And for Daniel Jones, who's someone who can grow everywhere, for him to go from trash to franchise, the view among the masses, what step does he need to take first? And that's why I'm going to pass it over to you on that note.
Well, Giants need to score more points. To kind of just put it simply.
Definitely.
And I'm legitimately not even just being a wise ass about it. Giants got to score more points, and we just did Daniel Jones's PPP on the TG, YouTube channel, podcast, whatever. And the Giants last year, they ran the 3rd least amount of offensive plays last year. So they're a team that didn't score points. They didn't run a lot of offensive plays, but they still somehow held the ball in terms of their average time of possession. They held the ball at somewhat of an average rate. And you look at the pass rate in quarters 1 through 3, Daniel Jones and this Giants passing offense is down in the bottom next to offenses like New Orleans, Tennessee, New England, Baltimore. They don't have those offensive lines to be running the ball as much as they do. Where really, and then you look at quarter number 4, the Giants offense had one of the highest pass rates in the National Football League. And I don't even want to say it's because they're playing catch up all the time. It was not a balanced offense. Nothing about the Giants was really balanced last year. And really the most stable thing about the Giants offense last year was Daniel Jones and his legs. 8 rushing plays of 20-plus yards the Giants rushing offense had last year. 4 of them came from the legs of Daniel Jones. And this is obviously, without Saquon Barkley, you're not going to be putting a lot of explosive plays up in the rushing game anyway. So what Jones needs to do is just get more consistent, be more stable, and also produce more explosive plays. This is a league of explosive passing plays. You mentioned Patrick Mahomes. The best quarterbacks in the National Football League, they produce explosive plays. That's why Josh Allen really broke out last year, in my opinion, because he got more accurate, and he got more accurate with his deep ball. And also you add Stephon Diggs, which isn't too bad too. But you add a guy like that, and hopefully Kenny Golladay can be, I don't want to say Stephon Diggs for the Giants and the Bills, but Kenny Golladay can be that explosive play option that this Giants passing offense desperately needs. And then also you include Saquon Barkley. He's a threat in the receiving game. Overall, this Giants offense just needs to get a lot more consistent. They need to put more points on the board. And that's kind of this is a bad answer, but it's also true.
No, that's a phenomenal answer. And I think it's actually funny that, Kenny Golladay, unquestionably the hottest free agency wide receiver on the market at the time, goes to the Giants, and then he's in the same conversation as Curtis Samuel. So that's where I'm like, whoa. I think there's this stigma that you look at fantasy accounts on Instagrams, you look at all these pages or podcasts by fans, and it's almost universal that if someone is on the Giants, they are a candidate to bust. Saquon Barkley, unquestionably the best athlete at the running back position, maybe behind Christian McCaffrey. In every way, strength, speed, elusiveness. Everybody's telling you to avoid him, right? And this is a kid where I've brought this stat up on every single podcast episode I've done so far. So there's a statistic out there that Daniel Jones in his 2 years has only played 12 games with Saquon Barkley. And in a 16-game span, Jones was on pace for 4,000 yards, I believe 30 touchdowns, and under 12 interceptions. So you give this kid his best weapon back, and it's not even that Saquon is giving those numbers or producing those numbers. It's the fear and the presence of him on the football field. And now, we watched in that preseason game against New England in Week 3 that the Patriots D-line absolutely slaughtered the Giants O-line. I mean, the next day they went out and started signing people. So it's no secret that this kid is under duress almost every snap. But now, to answer for teams' answer for Saquon was stack the box, and even that wasn't that effective. But you add a Kadarius Toney and you add a Kenny Golladay, you can't give these players the respect they're going to demand. It's going to make the offensive line's life easier. It's going to make Saquon's life easier, and it's going to make Kenny Galladay's life easier because you have someone like Kadarius Toney on the other side. You have Shepard at the slot, and you have Slayton and Ingram. I think I said Slayton twice. But anyway,
the only black cloud that's over this, Mike, is that you included those stats in that 16-game pace. You included it when Pat Shurmur was the play caller.
Yes,
the black cloud over this team is the offensive line, but it is also Jason Garrett. And if I had to put a percentage next to it, I would say 70-30 or 60-40. It's leaning Garrett versus the offensive line. When a lot of people would say it's the opposite, but the one thing that Daniel Jones did well last year was throw the ball down the field. The one thing. Like, he had 132 passer rating when he threw it 20-plus yards. When you look at the breakdown of when he threw it to 10 to 19 yards, 0 to 9 yards, and behind the line of scrimmage, he didn't have a passer rating in either of those 3 categories of the field. He didn't have a passer rating of throwing it better than 82. And it's kind of bizarre where, you're throwing it 20-plus yards where you're thinking when you throw it, the further down the field you throw it, the less likelihood of completion. That was like the total opposite for Daniel Jones. When he threw it down the field, he was likely to complete it. 10% of his passes went from 20, were attempted to go 20-plus yards last year. And you can make an argument that, why Daniel Jones was so efficient is because he didn't take a lot of those deep shots, which I think you're correct. But what we do need to see more of in 2020, and there is no excuse. Like last year, there was the excuse of, Slayton and Ingram's a disaster, and
Yep.
Golden Tate is not this contested catch guy. Sterling Shepard is like a possession wide receiver. Okay, like those excuses, they're not here this year because you have Kenny Galladay. Because Darius Slayton is here and he's not getting number one cornerback attention. Darius Slayton's here. He's a big play option. You can use Evan Ingram vertically and on the seam, right? Evan Ingram, every single Evan Ingram 20-plus yard play last year came when he was lined up out wide, not a single one with his hand in the ground. So we can do maybe some more things like that this year. There's no more excuses this year. So I'm done. I'm done with the excuses for Garrett, or even just, I hate to say that I'm done with the excuses with Jones too, but it is year 3, and we got to start to pick things up. We got to score more points. We got to put more yards. We got to sustain drives better, and we got to win some more football games. So that's the only thing. Where the black cloud over Jones and what we're talking about, this Giants offense and this Giants team in general, it is Jason Garrett, and also, like I said, the offensive line. Daniel Jones took 11 sacks in under 2.5 seconds last year, which was tied for first with Carson Wentz last year. So that also needs to improve too. You can't get the ball and then 1-2, there's a guy in your face and you're getting sacked.
Yeah, and I agree. And this is the last thing I'm going to say before we move on. When I was kind of breaking down some of these quarterbacks, I realized one of the reasons why Justin Herbert is so special is his, what makes a quarterback special to me is their ability to overcome. It doesn't matter if it's an obstacle on defense, where I think nobody does that better than Aaron Rodgers. And then an offensive line, I would argue that nobody overcomes a bad offensive line better than Justin Herbert, being that he came into the league statistically the best rookie of all time at the quarterback position, and was doing it behind a 32nd ranked offensive line. Now, Daniel Jones' offensive line is no better, but that's something he has to overcome. And we're going to talk about Jason Garrett more in the offensive line later in the Q&A portion. But the last thing I want to say is I was very excited about the Toney drafting as a Gators fan and a Giants fan. I would have preferred Rashawn Slater, seeing the line now and also then. But one of the things that's scaring me about Jason Garrett, and we could discuss this more at the end, but we are in that preseason game, we saw the same offense. And I think as Giants fans, that was our biggest fear, right? So where it's kind of, to me, increasing the correctness, if I'm saying that, if that makes sense, in drafting Kadarius Toney, is he's a receiver who you just need to get the ball in his hands. Yep. He's our most explosive receiver. He has the best burst out of anybody on the team. If we run those slant curl concepts, it's going to make him that much more valuable.
Yeah. So the thing about Toney is that he's not a tremendous route runner, and how you create separation is through your route running. Mm-hmm. But you are correct in saying that the goal for Toney this year is to just get the ball in his hands. At least the first half of this year, the first quarter of this year, Toney, it's kind of known by now. I don't think it's a secret that he had COVID and he was down bad with COVID, and you can't blame a guy for having that, right? Of, virus that, hundreds of thousands of, Americans have had over the last, almost 2 years now. So he was down bad with COVID, did not do anything in camp, really didn't do anything in camp, didn't suit up for a preseason game, nothing. So really the goal for Kadarius Toney early in this year, and this is a very good thing, this is a good problem to have, is just get the ball in his hands and get him a slither of space. And it's the same thing with Barkley, and it's the same thing with Toney, where you have two tremendous athletes at their respective spots. So that's like the goal for Toney, and that will definitely help a boring, bland offense that is Jason Garrett. So that's all. It's always been the case, even in Dallas. Just tremendous players elevating the scheme. That's what happened in Dallas, and that's kind of like what we're not unfortunately, it's what we're relying on with the Giants this year.
Absolutely, and I think Toney's a perfect segue into the first team we're going to talk about. Briefly, is week 1 against the Broncos. I have that as a win for the Giants because I think the defensive matchup is very similar, but I do think I give the edge to the Giants in they have similar skill set players at the wide receiver position and at tight end, being that Noah Fant is still dealing with that foot issue, the lingering foot issue, and Saquon Barkley will be healthy. But more importantly, and this is something I've said on the podcast multiple times, when you have a player where there's no tape on them, you can't game plan against them. This was why Jalen Hurts was able to come in and beat the Saints. This was why Taylor Heineke almost upset the Buccaneers in that playoff game. It's not because he's an exceptional talent. How the hell do you game plan against him if you haven't seen him before? Nobody knew Heineke could run. And with Toney, why I think he's going to be the biggest one of the biggest key factors in that game is nobody knows what to expect from him. He hasn't even played a preseason game. All you see is the little clips of him in training camp. So that's all I want to say about the Broncos game. I think we could both agree that we're going to chalk that up as a W. And then, anything you want to say about that?
I'm laughing because you just spun all of the Giants offense not playing in preseason and training camp to be a positive. Nobody knows how the Giants are going to use Kyle Rudolph. Nobody knows how the Giants are going to use Kenny Galladay. Nobody knows how the Giants are going to use Kadarius Toney. And nobody knows how the Giants are going to use Saquon Barkley. So you know what?
Surprise, baby.
That's actually really funny. I might actually tweet that after we record this.
That's fine.
That's really fun. I'm gonna tag you in that.
Awesome.
You just spun those guys missing all summer into a positive, and I'm here for it.
Awesome. Let's go to week 2. So this is the first game I want to focus on. It's at Washington. And, when I made these predictions, I didn't think about how bad Giants O-line looked. I didn't think it was going to look this bad. We kept hearing all the reports. Andrew Thomas looks better. Will Hernandez looks better. Andrew Thomas looked like Eric Flowers in his prime. And, as Giants fans, we know what prime Eric Flowers looks like.
Yep.
So some of the things I want to focus on in this game is, this is an absolute must-win for Washington because their schedule, their first 3 games are tough. They have the Chargers out of the gate with Herbert behind an 18th ranked offensive line according to PFF, that's scary if you're playing against him. Then they have the Giants at home for Washington, and then they play the Bills at Buffalo. So if they fall behind to 0-3, they play Falcons, which I have them winning, and at Atlanta, and then they play the Saints back at home, which I have them winning both of those games. However, if they start 0-3, then they win those 2 games, they're going to be 2-3. Then their next 4 games are going to be incredibly tough matchups. And especially tough for Ryan Fitzpatrick. They have the Chiefs at home. I don't think there's any universe where they beat the Chiefs. The Packers at Lambeau. And in a shootout, I'm taking Aaron Rodgers over Ryan Fitzpatrick every single time. Then they play the Broncos at Denver. And I think that defense is going to give Ryan Fitzpatrick an insanely tough time, being that they have the defensive players to match up exceptionally well against their skill players, being that Patrick Surtain will be covering De'Ami Brown or Curtis Samuel, who is a good enough player to handle both of them pretty handily. And then they have the bye, and then they play the Bucs. So if they start 0-3, they could come off the bye, play the Super Bowl champions in a rematch, and they could be looking at being, can't count right now, 2-7.
Oh boy.
And I think if they lose to the Giants at home, they're going to need to if Cam Newton's on the market still, they're going to really need, they said it today, they were considering it, but they're rolling with Fitzpatrick. They trust Heineke, and I think they have Kyle Allen as their third stringer.
They do.
So one question I want to hear from your perspective is I have a lot of confidence in Andrew Thomas. I think Andrew Thomas, he's going to pan out. I'm not really too worried about him. He looked horrible, but I think he's going to be all right. How does this offensive line stack up against Washington? And one thing that I think it's important to remember is amidst Andrew Thomas' struggles in 2020, he did not struggle against Chase Young in those contests.
Yeah, and even, I guess this is somewhat of a credit to Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas at his worst in 2020 was not as bad as Nate Solder in 2019, which a lot of fans, I think a lot of fans forget about that, and that shouldn't necessarily be a plus in Andrew Thomas's book, because when you're drafted 4th overall in a highly stacked tackle class, you are kind of expected to be the dude and be that guy. So how does the Giants offensive line stack up against Washington's O-line or their pass rush?
Their pass rush. Because they suck at pass blocking. It's not even
run blocking almost, I'm kind of confident the Giants is a run blocking unit, especially with Shane Lemieux in there and their new acquisition that they just got from Baltimore, and he went to Michigan. So Andrew Thomas, man, I really hope he's not going to overcorrect on what went wrong last year, because what we saw in the preseason game is he was really not trying to allow the inside move, which is what went wrong with him last year. He was trying to not allow the inside move, and he trusted his athleticism a little too much last year, where what we saw in the preseason game was he was getting beat around the edge, and that wasn't Thomas's problem last year. Thomas's problem was he would just not open up a little too much, and then he would allow that inside move. So I don't know. It really is a matter of, can Andrew Thomas go out there and perform like he did the second half of the year? Can he go out there and perform like he did throughout the majority of camp too?
Yeah.
During those individual drills in New England, I saw it with my own eyes. It's like, this dude is athletic. He's moving. He's punching well. He's controlling his guys. He's mirroring very well. And hopefully we're looking at that third preseason game, and we're just saying that, oh, this is just something that they're coaching him on, and they're just working on it for one game, and then he can go back to playing the game that he usually did play when he was at Georgia and when he was towards the second half of last year. The person that I am most concerned about now, Shane Lemieux, we don't know his injury status and whatnot. He is hurt. He's going to try to play through it.
Partially torn pec, I think.
Yeah. But I'm more concerned about Matt Parrott.
I agree.
Seeing him at the Patriots joint practice and seeing the way that he's playing, he doesn't have that same mean streak and aggression that the rest of those guys have. So Montez Sweat, guy like Montez Sweat, who, both these guys are fast and strong. They could certainly have a day with both those tackles. And you saw it from that New England preseason game where the Giants were able to put together a 2-minute drive. But outside of that, when you have your quarterback taking a 5-step drop back there, they can't do it because those guys are going to get beat off the edge and they're going to get their asses kicked. And Jones doesn't have that pocket mobility like a Brady does, like a Wilson does, or those guys where he steps up and he can sense things. Yeah. Jones doesn't have that, and he's kind of just a statue back there at times, and it's a bad recipe for success for sure.
Definitely. Matt Parrott kind of reminds me of, to all the Game of Thrones fans out there, Hodor, where he has the size, he has the stature to be this grimacing, menacing guy, but he doesn't do it. Bobby on Talkin Giants made a very good point that, when Matt Parrott latches on to someone, he can go up with whoever he's lined up against. And to make the point about that he made against Andrew Thomas is Andrew Thomas, and this goes for any position, any athlete, you need to be able to trust your instincts. And Andrew Thomas, in my opinion, his biggest weakness is he doesn't trust his athleticism enough. He doesn't just trust himself to just go block someone. He is a person who suffers from constantly thinking. They use this in basketball a lot for all the basketball fans out there. When you're taking a jump shot, you don't think about it, and it's got to be one motion from your feet down to your fingertip. Andrew Thomas just looks like he's left foot, left punch, right punch, and it's not just fluid. That's my take on Andrew Thomas. But,
and it hurts when you have how many different offensive line coaches has he had in one season? This is his third going into his second season. I think Colombo really effed him up. Colombo really effed him up. He had him doing, and I hope Rob Sale's not doing it too, because he looked decent against the Jets, and he wasn't doing this against the Jets. But what Colombo had him doing, Bobby talked about this, what Colombo had him doing early in the season is trying to do this hand swipe thing and then re-engage with offensive linemen. It's like, dude, he's big enough, he's strong enough. Just play your game. Don't worry about, hitting somebody else's hands and getting their hands off you. Just to trust your athleticism, get out there, get your long kick steps going, and let's rock and roll.
That's one thing I'm going to say about Andrew Thomas. Then we could talk about, there's one point I want to make about coaching and talent at the end, but if you watch the NFL Top 100, David Bakhtiari, left tackle for the Green Bay Packers, was on there, and he's most famously known for his left kickback. And I think that's something that, he does it every rep, no matter if it's a run block, not a run block, but any pass rep, he does do that violent, aggressive left kickback, no matter what.
It's fun,
I think that is something Andrew Thomas needs to adopt, because I think giving yourself that extra, for someone like Andrew Thomas who's athletic enough to recover in any manner, giving yourself that extra step to assess and then instinctually react would elevate him to that Tristan. Everybody compares him to Tristan Wirfs and Jedrick Wills. That would put him right in that conversation. And I really do think that he is beyond outclassing Mekhi Becton. I don't care what anybody says. Mekhi Becton is just a brute of a human being. He's not, in my opinion, a fundamentally good left tackle. But let's go to the next game. So after Washington at week 2, I'm giving them the L. I think Washington's going to come out and beat us that game, because I do think it's going to be tough for one, the O-line to kind of gel, because that's really the only true unit in a football team is the offensive line that is completely dependent on one another. But also, I think it's going to be really tough for Daniel Jones to come into year 3 and go 5-0 against Washington. It can be done.
Oh, why not?
I think he could do it. I think he could do it, but I'm gonna give it to Washington because it's at Washington.
Come on, aren't the Giants known for beating these bridge quarterbacks, backup quarterbacks? Come on, so we got 2 of them to start the season.
Bro, I want to give it to him so bad. I'm just not gonna do it.
All right, 1-1. All right, let's roll.
So then we go to Atlanta. I don't even think that's even the only concern I have in Atlanta is Kyle Pitts. That's it. I think that James Bradbury has reps against Calvin Ridley, has reps against Julio Jones, has reps against Michael Thomas. In that division, he's not going to be a problem. I think Russell Gage is kind of the biggest question mark of what is he going to be like? And then we have Kyle Pitts. And I don't know. When we talk about the Chiefs, that's something I want to bring up is how do we game plan for Travis Kelce? And I think Kyle Pitts is kind of in the same conversation of how do we do it? But we're not going to talk. I have them winning at Atlanta despite the Kyle Pitts situation. The next game I want to park it on is Week 4 at Saints. So I'm going to say some things, and then I want you to answer this question first, and then you can give your spiel. So my preseason takeaway from the Saints is they're going to be fine. The receiving corps is fine. Jameis Winston looks good enough, right? What do you make of the Saints as a team? Because I don't know if they're going to be because I trust Sean Payton. I trust Sean Payton a ton. I think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. But what do you think, besides Alvin Kamara, what are the Saints? Besides an above-average defense?
Yeah, I would be interested. One of the thing that I'm most looking forward to watching the Saints in terms of start the year is the intended air yards and how far down the field are the Saints throwing the ball? Because towards the latter end of Drew Brees' career, it was notorious just dump off, quick passing game. And I remember kind of growing up, Drew Brees airing it out. Drew Brees throwing it down the field on those big explosive plays. I'm going to say explosive plays a million times this episode because the NFL is a league of explosive plays. So Jameis Winston, that's his career. Yes. I'm going to throw it 30 yards down the field, and it's either going to be a touchdown or it's going to be an interception, and there's no in between. So Jameis Winston is the perfect guy if Sean Payton wants to adapt in terms of the quarterbacks that were available for them and that was realistic for them. Jameis Winston was the perfect guy and has been the perfect guy for them to adopt that offense of throwing it down the field more. But do they have the personnel to do it? Which I'm typically not the person that likes to make the excuse of personnel because I didn't make the excuse last year with Jason Garrett with the Giants. But do they have the personnel to do it without Michael Thomas for the first part of the season? Alvin Kamara certainly is that option. What I love about Alvin Kamara and the way that they use Alvin Kamara in New Orleans is that his average depth of target as a running back is always above 1 yard. In 2018, it was 1.8, which that is unheard of. That is unheard of. And I think Kamara is one of the, if not the best running back in the NFL because of how the Saints use him. If Kamara was maybe on any other team, I don't know if he would be considered to be a top 5 running back. But because they use him so well and so creatively, especially in the passing game, that's what makes him a top back in the league. And so here's my take on this. I think Alvin Kamara, maybe besides Derrick Henry, but that's just because they give him so much volume. Alvin Kamara is the only running back in the NFL that is worth this contract.
Interesting.
That is my take.
I would counter and say that Nick Chubb 100% deserves. I think that you have a system where you have a number 1, number 2 offensive line every year. You have the best running game, and now Baker Mayfield doesn't have to do anything. Because I said last podcast episode that there's that famous line from Baker Mayfield of talking about Daniel Jones of some people forget, paraphrasing, some people have to forget they have to go out and win games and they just overthink it. If Kevin Stefanski was in that war room in 2018, Baker Mayfield would not have been their selection. I would put all my bank account on that take. 100%.
That's an interesting take. That's a good question.
Way. Because Kevin Stefanski has had to build his team to make up for Baker Mayfield. You're telling me he wouldn't have taken who he's gone to an NFC Championship with in Case Keenum. He's not going to take the bigger, stronger Sam Darnold, more athletic Sam Darnold, the bigger potential, higher ceiling Josh Allen, maybe even Lamar Jackson if he wanted to gamble. I don't think he would take.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that he would have taken Saquon.
Looking back on that draft, the Browns actually could have went Saquon, Quentin Nelson, and then if they traded up their 2 to get back into the first, gotten Lamar. And that would have been, the most insane fantasy real-life football team ever.
Yeah, they really would have.
So I think that we both agree Giants go in here and win this game.
Here's also the thing about New Orleans. I'm speculating that this may be a home game for the Giants.
True. It is week 4,
the most recent storm.
So 5 weeks.
I'm speculating because I know they're starting week 1 in Jacksonville, and I don't know they're not playing Jacksonville against Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
So the last time that there was Hurricane Katrina, there was an early regular season game in 2005 that Giants played the Saints, and the Giants played home. Now, why I think that they should play MetLife, selfishly, because I am a Giants regular season ticket holder, so I would like to go to that game, and I would like an extra home game. And also, second of all, MetLife Stadium is basically a neutral site anyway. It's not home field advantage for the Giants. So that is like a wild card a part of this game too.
Yeah, I'd agree. And one last question I want to ask you, and then we're gonna move on from the Saints. Jameis Winston, is fundamentally a turnover machine. Now you could say the same thing about Daniel Jones, but my point is,
Daniel Jones reversed it in 2020.
He did 100%.
Jameis has grown more into a turnover machine.
But only we know that as Giants fans, because people are just gonna see the box score and be like, "Oh, he had 3 picks and a fumble." Nobody knows it hit Evan Ingram in the mouth or on a toss, and he fumbled or intercepted the ball. But why is it so much easier for fans to get behind Jameis Winston and be like, "Oh, he's gonna break out this year," even though he's done nothing? He didn't even play in 2020.
I'll tell you why.
All right,
and I'm not with those people that Jameis Winston's going to break out and become a top quarterback, but he produces yards and he produces points. I mean, at the end of the day, the dude, he throws the ball down the field, and in Tampa Bay, while they did turn over the ball, and you can't turn over the ball that much. You can't. I'm not defending that. But also, you would rather have a quarterback that takes risks on big plays than not take those risks. He makes mistakes that are inexcusable, and he makes those mistakes, like those WTF throws that we get mad at Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones maybe had just a couple of those last year. All of them versus Tampa were just the WTF. Week one against the Steelers was like, what the heck are you doing, Daniel Jones? But every single interception that Jameis has, that's a WTF moment.
Yeah.
Whereas most quarterbacks, you only maybe can handpick 1 or 2, 3, 4 every year, where it's like, well, what were you doing on this play? So that's the problem with James, but the potential is there. So I don't think, fans should diminish that the potential, the big play potential, and the ability to score points is absolutely there. But it's how Sean Payton can kind of pull in the reins a little bit and get him to utilize the check down, utilize the intermediate part of the field, and just balance all that together. He did get LASIK eye. He got the LASIK eye surgery, and that's apparently a fun talking point.
Yeah, I think that is going to actually make a substantial difference. I think so.
Seeing
seeing
is important.
You got to be able to see. No, but one thing I was going to kind of make this point at the end, but I think it's good you brought it up now. The WTF moments. With Daniel Jones, I think Giants fans are one of the most erratic fan bases in the NFL. And, if Evan Ingram falls into the end zone in this preseason game, Darius Slayton catches the ball that hit him in both of the hands, perfectly timed off his break. Daniel Jones finishes 170 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Giants fans are acting like he's George Washington and it's 1776. But because of the pick, now it's like, all right, Sam Howell or the other guys. I don't even know who's out there. So, that's what bothers me about Giants fans. It's like, this kid has such little room for error now. Because if he does take that gamble, I would be happy if he throws a pick throwing it 40 yards down the field. Because that's a punt, essentially. But now if he throws a pick and it's 40 yards down the field, and me and you, nerds like us, are like, oh, great, we took an explosive shot. People are like, another pick for Daniel Jones. So that's where I'm like, I think it was... I forgot who tweeted it, but it was the most accurate Daniel Jones basically summary. And it was, his good is amazing, but his bad is eye-wrenching. And it is the most accurate. That's why I've been a Daniel Jones believer since 2019. My brother and my father-in-law are the only 2 people that I heard him mention Daniel Jones prior to the draft. And they got me on board, and I was like, you know what? This kid has upside, blah, blah, blah. I followed him. I have sided with him. I will be a Daniel Jones martyr if he doesn't pan out. But I think that, you see the glimpses, and it's like, how could you not want this kid to succeed, or how could you not factor in the situation with it?
Yeah, and the problem is with turnovers like that he made in the preseason game is like, yeah, you can point to, if Evan Ingram dives in and Darius Slayton catches that ball. The reality is that they didn't. And also the Giants offense is not good enough to be successful with mistakes like that. And it's unfortunate where we're saying that Daniel Jones needs to be absolutely perfect for this offense to be successful and for the Giants to win games. Yeah, we're kind of saying that because this offense isn't good enough to afford a mistake in the red zone, because you don't know when or the next time the Giants are even going to get into the red zone. That's the problem. That's the problem where with every field goal that they would kick when they crossed the 50-yard line, or every field goal they would kick inside the 20 last year, and with every not going for it on fourth down and being aggressive. And especially, think back to that Cleveland game where, Joe Judge was actually really aggressive that Cleveland game. But there were certain
Garrett
games
wasn't calling plays that game too. It was Freddie Kitchens.
Look at that. Look at that. I scratch my head on that.
I thought they were going to fire him after that game, honestly.
No. I think John Mara likes him too much. But, anyway, this offense just is not good enough to sustain those mistakes because you don't know the next time that they're going to be in a position to score points. And that's the big issue.
Yeah, I agree. And, last point I'm going to make, but I heard some people who absolutely hate Daniel Jones and some ex-quarterbacks talking about that pick. And that pick unquestionably was horrible. I mean, you can't make that throw in the way he did, right? Yeah. And what these ex-players were saying that were in his shoes is it wasn't the wrong read, it was how he threw the ball. Because they were saying, as a quarterback, you need to be able to process, if I throw this ball, what's the worst case scenario? Because throwing it, running right, throwing to your left, you're throwing it on a trajectory where the defensive player is coming into the ball, right? Yeah. Whereas if he floats it to Evan Ingram, the reason why he seeded it was because I think the cornerback following whoever receiver was there shaded over to in front of him. If he floats it, worst case scenario is an incompletion. Best case scenario is a touchdown. And on principle, we go to fourth down or third down, kick the field goal, and even though it's a preseason game, it doesn't matter. But the contest ends 23-22, Giants win. Yeah. So that's kind of where I think he needs to think through what he's doing more. But to go to the next game, Week 5, oops, wrong way. Week 5, we have we're playing at Dallas. And historically, Zeke, there's always one running back that just absolutely destroys the Giants. For the Eagles, it was Boston Scott. For the Giants, it should be, but it is Ezekiel Elliott. And, the loss of Dalvin Tomlinson, something to factor into this game. But one of the things I will say is this is going to be a very high-stakes game for the Giants. We have them coming in at 3-1 or 4-1. No, 3-1. We're playing at Dallas, and we should have swept Dallas last season if it wasn't for the offensive PI call against them at Dallas the first time we played. So how does our new defensive line stack up against Zeke? And what do you think the stakes and ramifications of a loss would be this week? I have them beating them because I think that the Giants are we have been swept every year. We've been swept by the Cowboys. We've been swept by the Eagles almost every year. I think it's time the Giants turn around and start, break out the broom themselves, so to speak. What do you think about this game at Dallas with fans?
Dalvin is a huge loss. Dalvin's athleticism is rare for an interior defensive lineman, but they bring in a guy like Danny Shelton, who is an immovable object. He's not going to bring the same. He's not going to bring the same athleticism. He's not going to move as well as Dalvin Tomlinson, but he is going to plug some holes for you. So guys like Dexter. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So guys like Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams can make plays. Lorenzo Carter, him being here, that's going to be huge. Lorenzo Carter last year, I believe the Dallas game is the game in which he went down. Dak Prescott went down. I think also Lorenzo Carter started that game, and he went down with his Achilles injury too. And he's looked decently well in camp too. He is a better run defender than he is a pass rusher. And I also think the upgrade at interior linebacker is huge for the Giants this year.
Who
Look at this
signed?
interior.
Roche?
Look at this. Look at this interior linebacker room that we have now. We have Blake Martinez, who we feel good about, number one. But tell me, the last time you felt this confident about the depth in the interior linebacker room. It's Reggie Ragland, who I think is going to be majority of a first and second down player. It's a free agent that we brought over from Detroit. Then we have Tate Crowder, who, Mr. Irrelevant last year, played, started, was a factor on this Giants defense.
Yep.
He will continue to be a factor on this Giants defense, doing whatever Patrick Graham wants him to do and whatever packages that's necessary. And Carter Coughlin, who has tackled and played the run very, very well, along with being a naturally gifted pass rusher because he was an edge rusher at Minnesota. And then he was an interior linebacker at high school, went to edge rusher at Minnesota, but then doesn't have that size and play strength to really set the edge in the NFL. So then guess what? They flipped him over to interior linebackers. So that's 4 interior linebackers. Blake Martinez is going to be on the field for every single snap as long as he's healthy. And then 3 guys that they can kind of alternate in there. Plus, they also like to run 3 safety sets and 4 safety sets. So sometimes there could be 1 interior linebacker on the field or no interior linebackers on the field. So Patrick Graham, between, yes, losing Dalvin Thompson, but between the versatility that these interior linebackers bring, between the versatility that all 4 safeties can bring, Julian Love, Peppers, Ryan, McKinney, between the versatility they all could bring, Patrick Graham is going to have so much fun this year. Oh, and also remember, they basically signed a CB1 in free agency, Adoree Jackson, who would be a CB1 on teams who are struggling with their secondary. Talk about
Xavier
I think
McKinney. Don't forget
Xavier McKinney absolutely too. He's working as like a free agent acquisition too because he barely even played last year.
And
so
he shined when he did play. He got better every week.
Patrick Graham is going to have a lot of fun and kind of going to how the Giants can stop Zeke with mixing up the looks at interior linebacker with also a Giants defense that can be more aggressive this year and blitz more because they have better coverage on the back end. They feel more confident about their CB1 and CB2s. When you can blitz more and you can play more man coverage on the back end, hopefully that will help both the run defense and it'll also help the pass rusher getting back there and hitting the quarterback more too.
It's good that you make the point about Adoree Jackson because I think Adoree Jackson is going to be fundamentally essential in almost every one of these close games because we didn't have to worry about Amari Cooper, but CeeDee Lamb was going to light us on fire. But now you add Adoree Jackson to cover him, and one of the things I would have put on the screen for the people watching on YouTube is Aaron Robinson, who's left on the PUP list as of today. So he's not going to be there this game, which is actually going to hurt us really bad because let's not forget, they do have Michael Gallup. And Michael Gallup, before CeeDee Lamb joined the team, was coming off a 1,000-yard receiving season. So at this game, I think that why I'm giving the edge to the Giants is our defense. For anybody who's played football, it's way harder to score points than to have points stopped from being scored. So, I think the Giants, if we're clicking on offense and, Saquon's going to be there, we shouldn't have a problem going down and scoring on this team. And one of the points I want to make about why Saquon could be an X factor in this, he's going to be an X factor in every game, but it's particularly this one, is if you are a fantasy listener, and for people who just follow football, we've been hearing the reports of, Zeke looks amazing in training camp. Well, he absolutely should. This defense couldn't stop a nosebleed last year if it was in the running game. And you have a top 10 offensive line being Dallas's. Zeke should be lighting them on fire in camp. So, it's not going to be that easy once the season starts. These reports are going to be not as electrifying, so to speak. But this is going to be an interesting game to watch. And I think if we could come out and, win the first one, lose the second one, week 1, week 2, and then go 3 games into the Rams, we're going to have a chance. But to go to the Rams, I'm chalking that up as an L. When I was first thinking about this and, going through the schedule, I was thinking, well, we really only lost by 3 or 4 points, right? And we didn't have Saquon. But now it's a completely different regime. Cam Akers is gone and Stafford's there. So the offense is going to be completely different. It's going to be harder to game plan. So I'm going to give the Rams as one of my favorite teams in the NFC to win the conference. I'm going to give it to the Rams. So that's going to wrap up part 1 of the Pylon Cam Podcast Special Guest Edition. Come back tomorrow picking up with Week 7, New York Giants at home against the Panthers, followed up by the rest of the schedule breakdown, and a special Q&A with Justin Penik. See you tomorrow. Peace!